The 15th round of the 2013 IndyCar season took place in wine country, Sonoma Raceway in Sonoma, California. At this point, the championship battle was heating up quite nicely, but there was one story entering the race that trumped it. Sarah Fisher-Hartmann Racing announced that German sports car driver Lucas Lohr would make his debut in the series, in a one-off entry using the number 97. This would be the first and so far only time that the number has been used in both the Indy Racing League and the reunified IndyCar series, and the first time the number was used in any version of IndyCar since Cristiano D'Amata and PPI Motorsport used the number in kart in 2000. Lucas was set to make his first open-wheel start since his time in the German F3 series back in 1998. As for the championship hunt, it was really a two-horse race between leader Helio Castroneves and Scott Dixon 31 points behind. But for the two championship contenders, Sonoma wasn't going to be easy. For Helio, he was off the back of a terrible crash in a Brazilian stock car race, where a brake failure gave him some minor leg injuries. While Helio was hurting physically, Scott Dixon was hurting emotionally. Before the race in Sonoma, Chip Ganassi's father Floyd passed away, and on the Wednesday before the race, Scott Dixon's sister-in-law passed as well. For drivers up and down the grid, Sonoma was going to be an interesting, challenging, and dramatic race. Dario Franchitti would start the race from the pole, with Scott Dixon completing a Ganassi front row lockout. Helio Castroneves would be in 5th, sharing the 3rd row with Charlie Kimball, who 3 weeks earlier won his first IndyCar race in Mid-Ohio. James Davidson would start in 25th and last thanks to engine penalties. With the founder and CEO of GoPro, Nick Woodman, giving the command to start the engines, we can get to the start of the 2013 Indy Grand Prix of Sonoma. Dario Franchitti would get a great start, something that couldn't be said about Charlie Kimball, who went way too hot and heavy into turn 2, nearly rear-ending Ryan Hunter-Reay before hitting Helio Castroneves, half-spinning and then getting stuck in anti-stall, grinding him to a halt. This will bring out the first full-course yellow of the day. There would also be issues for Joseph Newgarden, who made contact with EJ Vizo before hitting gearbox troubles himself. Both Newgarden and Kimball would continue on. On the lap 4 restart, it was Dario Franchitti still in the lead, but all eyes were on Sebastian Bourdais, who clipped his front wing on the back of Marco Andretti. Another eye-grabbing moment came as Will Power tried to pass Scott Dixon around the outside of turn 2. This would end poorly, with Power dropping back like a rock in the process. Besides that, the restart was clean, briefly, as on lap 6, EJ Vizo would be involved in yet another incident. This time it was with Justin Wilson, who pitched him into a spin after Vizo tried a bonehead move down the inside of the turn 7 hairpin. Wilson would spin and stall, bringing out the second full course yellow. Vizo would get a drive-through penalty as a result. On the next restart, it was once again clean at the front and chaotic towards the back. Vizo would nearly push Takuma Sato off the track, and one turn later, Tristan Vautier would nearly get spun by J.R. Hildebrand. With Vizo serving as drive-through, the race would finally settle into a groove, with Dario Franchitti in the lead still. This piece would last for about 6 laps. Sebastian Bourdais would have his second incident of the day. This time it was with Simona Di Silvestro at the hairpin, where Bourdais rear-ended her, breaking his front wing in the process and bringing out the 3rd caution of the day. After a round of pit stops, the field was significantly shuffled, with Ryan Hunter-Reay staying out and taking the lead. Chaos would return on the ensuing restart, as after James Hinchcliffe dropped a wheel off the track, the field got checked up quite badly. 3 wide into turn 3 with Pagenaud, Rahal, and Andretti was a recipe for disaster, and it ended exactly how you'd expect, with Rahal getting pitched into a spin and multiple other drivers getting involved. Despite this incident showering the track in debris, it wouldn't bring out the caution. This was certainly a shame for Charlie Kimball, who had just passed Ryan Hunter-Reay into turn 1, putting himself on the lead lap. We would have to wait a little bit before the yellow would come out again. This time it was for a spin for J.R. Hildebrand in turn 7. The field was even more shuffled up for the lap 25 restart, with Justin Wilson in 1st, James Hinchcliffe in 2nd, and Sebastian Saavedra in 3rd. Saavedra was having a rough season to this point, but on the restart he would do something he's best at, causing an accident. Going into turn 2, Saavedra would run into the back of Hinchcliffe, with James somehow saving it. Saavedra would get a penalty for avoidable contact, while Tristan Vautier would go off and shower the back straightaway in dirt, before James Jake's engine blew up, leaving the Englishman stopped in the runoff area of turn 9. With a 5th full course yellow of the day, a new record would be set for the most cautions in a Sonoma race, and the fact the record was set only 30 laps in is honestly absurd. However, this caution would be a bit of a turning point in the race, as for the rest of the race there would only be 2 more cautions. After a long yellow flag period to recover Jake's car, the race would finally be restarted, with Justin Wilson in the lead and Scott Dixon in 2nd. Dixon would get an amazing restart, taking the lead with a powerful move into turn 2. Wilson meanwhile was really struggling with pace on the restart, dropping back like a rock before pitting on lap 37. At the halfway mark of the race, your top 5 was Scott Dixon, Will Power, Dario Franchitti, Elio Castroneves, and Marco Andretti. Shortly after the halfway mark, the pit stops began. Will Power was the first to come in, followed by Scott Dixon a lap later. It was extremely close, but Dixon would stay ahead of Power. Tony Kanaan would take the lead until he too came in on lap 50, giving James Hinchcliffe the lead for the following 6 laps. After Hinchcliffe relinquished the lead, the race came down to Scott Dixon and Will Power in first and third on the same strategy, and Justin Wilson playing the fuel game in second. The longest green flag stint of the race would come to an end after 30 laps, as Joseph Newgarden pulled over to the side of the track with the gearbox issues he suffered at the start. With the yellow coming out, Will Power and Scott Dixon would file in for their last pit stops. But then, controversy reared its ugly head. Travis Law, who is Will Power's right rear tire changer, casually walked from the car after the pit stops were done, with absolutely zero regard to Scott Dixon, who was trying to come out of the pits himself. Dixon clipped the tire that Law was holding, and would thus be penalized. In my opinion, the decision to just casually walk with the tire was made in an attempt to ruin Scott Dixon's race. You would have to have the IQ of a fruit fly to think that casually strolling around the back of the car, knowing fully well that there's another car trying to exit the pits just feet away from you, was a good idea. Travis had the room to move over and give Dixon more space, but he didn't, and in my opinion, he did it deliberately. Now, I'm not saying it's 100% factual that it was an intentional move, but from my perspective and in my opinion, it looked pretty shady. Dixon would be in the lead of the race on the next restart, but along with the restart came the penalty for Dixon, which in my opinion is one of the worst officiating calls in recent IndyCar history. With that, the lead was essentially gifted to Will Power. It looked like Power was set to have his first win since Sao Paulo the year prior, but with 7 laps to go, the 7th caution would come out. Ryan Briscoe went for a desperate move down the inside of Charlie Kimball into turn 7. Oh, I just realized that was 3 7s in a row. Well, if I lived in Vegas, I'd be a millionaire now, but anyway, Charlie Kimball would get spun out as a result. Kimball then tried to get the car spun around in the right direction, but would run head-on into Sato and Ed Carpenter. The incident would be cleaned up after a few laps, and we'd get the race restart with 5 laps to go, but it really wasn't much of a contest. Besides a crash for Sebastian Saavedra in the turn 9 chicane, and an engine issue for Lucas Lohr, the final laps were pretty uneventful as Will Power took the victory, with Justin Wilson in second and Dario Franchitti in third. Elio Castroneves was a big winner of this race, with his lead in the championship growing, while race director Bo Barfield was the biggest loser, with his post-race interview explaining the penalty being one of the most pin-headed interviews I've seen in 14 years of me watching auto racing. Although this race was effectively stained by the call to penalize Scott Dixon, it's still one of my favorite IndyCar races at Sonoma. It had intriguing strategy, mayhem, interesting storylines throughout, and would have had a great battle for the win in the final 20 laps, if it wasn't for one of the dumbest officiating calls I've seen in my whole life. Thank you for watching, and have a great afternoon.